The Silent King. The Silent King was a staple of many ninth edition Necron dynasties. What with Games Workshop giving many units core that didn't have core before, he was able to be a battery to charge many Necron forces in the competitive scene. Now, the Silent King is much different in 10th edition. His stat line is stronger considering the change of everything and the change of different toughnesses, etc., as well as his weapons, his damage output, and all around his abilities. So how does this guy stack up with some of the other units in the game? Is he still a battery like he was before? And does he even still have a place on the table in 10th edition? What's up, everybody? I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation, bringing you another video for my cronies, and welcoming back all of my 40k fanatics who might just be looking at this video to see what they could be up against in friendly or competitive matchups where this Silent King might be looming in their local meta. Again, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel, please do turn on the bell for notifications to get more content such as this. In the near future, I plan on looking at some of the Grey Knights and some of their stuff and what they can do. Right now, getting ready to take the family on a little vacation, so I wanted to put this video together before we head out, talking about the Silent King, because I've been thinking about him a lot, thinking about what we can do with him. So let's take a look at him and see what we got here. For starters, let's look at his stat line. So his move characteristic is 7, and fly, means that he's probably not going to be able to clear most terrain. But still, 7-inch move means at least he can get out of the backfield and move around a little bit. Toughness 10 is a nice place to be at, given the fact of a lot of Strength 9 weapons, so the Toughness 10 is good for making those weapons need to wound him on a 5. He now has a 2-up save. That 2-up save is going to be quite beneficial with some of the lower AP weapons and 0 AP weapons to help keep him alive. Still coming in with 16 wounds, leadership 5, so a difficult unit to battle shock, and objective control value of 6. The menhirs, or the rocks that I like to call them that float around the side of them, have an objective control value of 1, so he will be looking at objective control value of 8 when both of them are alive. The menhirs have basically the same stat line as him, so there's no issues in worrying about what stats you'll need to be using and when for majority purposes, with the only difference being the fact that they have 5 wounds, which was the same in 9th edition. So all in all, he has about 26 wounds to take him down. But as we're going to look at later on, it's going to be much, much more difficult than that with some of the stratagems and effects that we have. So let's look over his weapons and see what's changed and what's gotten better. So the first thing is, the way they've done the Silent King now, and I do like this, is that his weapons from before, there was multiple profiles, and it affected like all the little friends on the throne. So as you beat up the Silent King, some of the cryptechs that were on the throne would inherently just stop functioning. There wouldn't be any damage from them, and some of the weapons that they had you couldn't use, as well as their auras and abilities. This isn't the case anymore. Now he is what he is, all the way down to, let's see, 6 wounds. And at that point, then you subtract 1 from the hit rolls. But up until that, he has the stat line all the way through, so you're not losing weapons as you go through. The weapons have changed. Let's start off with his range weapons. So first, the Annihilator Beams, which is off of the menhirs, the rocks. All of his guns are now 24-inch range, so he doesn't have the long-range las cannon-like fire that he had before, but still solid guns. 1 shot per rock. Each one has the Annihilator Beam. And Ballistic Skill 2-up, which we'll see across the board on the Silent King. It is a strength 14, -4 for 6 flat damage. So roughly the same as what we've seen before. Good AP, very high strength, and very strong damage. Now getting over to the other 2 range profiles on him, he has 2 attacks that hit on 2s at strength 10, AP 3, 3 damage from the Scepter of Eternal Glory. Now these shots cause devastating wounds. So it's nice. It's not something you're going to really rely upon per se, but when it hits, you're going to smile when those mortal wounds just happen to go through. What's really interesting is his last weapon. It's 12 shots, strength 6, AP 1, 1 damage, but it has indirect fire. This is something brand new to the Silent King that we did not see before, with him now having the indirect fire capability. I haven't had a chance to put it on the table and see, but I can imagine that this may be very, very, very effective, especially considering the fact that with the Silent King's fly, getting over buildings is going to be kind of difficult. So at least now with the indirect fire capabilities, he can get to units that are behind walls and might be out objective controlling him on an objective marker that might be split between a piece of terrain. Going over into melee, he has a just close combat weapon for 1 attack, weapon skill 4, strength 4, 0 AP, 1 damage. I'm assuming that that is just basically the manures. Yeah, it is. It's just the manures and their close combat effect. So no real extra combat damage from them. They still just have a basic profile because everything's got a combat profile in 10th edition. As for Zarek himself, he only has 1 attack profile, which has lethal hits from the Scythe of Dust, for 12 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 8, AP 3, 2 damage. Not a terrible profile when it comes to taking on infantry, but if you get this guy in combat, you're probably going to want to try and shoot your way out with with the Menhir's Annihilator beams, as opposed to bashing a vehicle down with only dealing 2 damage and a strength 8. A lot of units have a toughness of 9 or higher in the vehicle column, so it's going to be kind of difficult to take them down with just that scepter, with just the Scythe of Dust. All right, so that's what the Silent King looks like on paper as far as just his weapons and his attack profile. Now we need to start getting over into the technical. And for the rest of this video, it's going to be more into the technical side of how all this translates and what this functions to. The first thing to remember is, although the Silent King is a vehicle, is a character, and does have all the abilities on himself, he is a Necron. He does have the faction keyword of Necron, which means that all of his abilities affect him as well. He is included in all of that. He technically has +1 to hit because because of command protocols in the character, but he also has all the effects that go with it. Now, some may argue he's not technically leading a unit and not a leader, and that may be true. That's something that, looking down that investment, he might not get the +1 to hit for command protocols because he's not technically leading the unit. He is the unit. So that one, I'd have to say if someone said, yeah, no, this is how this qualifies and he doesn't get the +1, that may be a possibility. But everything else I'm about to say affects him. He is a Necron keyword, and he would get all the benefits from his different abilities. So looking at his abilities, Deadly Demise D6 +3, so he can blow up and do some big damage when he dies. Hopefully that never happens. Never ever happens. He does have reanimation protocols. So this is going to matter for multiple things later on. Right now on basis, that means in the command phase, he heals D3 wounds. This means that if he has no wounds and you have one of your rocks gone and that's the only damage you've taken, your reanimation protocol can bring the Menhirs back based on state-based rules. So something we were trying to do in 9th was resurrecting them. Guess what? You can now. Voice of the Triarch. Voice of the Triarch is his big epic hero ability. Like we've seen with like Gilliman and the Lion, they tend to be able to pick their different auras and effects that are kind of like warlord traits in this edition for the unit to have. At the start of each battle round, you select one Triarch ability. Until the start of the next battle round, this ability is in effect. So by the reading, you can pick the same ability multiple times. You can switch, you can go back and forth. You just pick one of these at the start of each battle round, not player turn, battle round, to be in effect for that entire battle round. We'll get over those in a second. I want to talk about his other ability. Once per turn at the end of your command phase, you can select one friendly Battle Shock Necron unit within 12 inches of Zarek. That unit is no longer battle shocked. What's nice about this is the timing. It is at the end of the command phase. So you've already tested battle shock and your unit has failed. Now you can select it and it passes battle shock at the end of the command phase. So you're able to still use stratagems on it and it has its standard objective control value. So that's a very nice ability. Now, granted, the 470 plus points that he cost, that's not all we got. The weapons, the strength, the attack, the guns, all look really good, but that isn't our near 500 point unit and just what it has. So first, let's talk about the Triarch abilities and what you get for it. And again, remember, he would be affected by all these as well when they're in effect. First, we have Fairy of the Stars. While a friendly Necron unit is within 6 inches of Xeric model, each time a model in this unit makes a ranged attack, reroll hit rolls of 1 and reroll wound rolls of 1. Last edition, we saw how big this was for making the Silent King be able to reroll the shots with the Annihilation Beach. Now that the range is kind of reduced down to 24, okay, so that's a mild nerf, but you're re-rolling hit and wound rolls of 1. So anything up to toughness 7, so toughness 8 and above, would need 3s to wound, but anything below that, you're going to need 2s to wound and be re-rolling everything. Not to mention the fact of the Staff of Stars and its indirect fire. This will really be efficient for those weapons, as well as just the rest of your army, because this is a 6-inch aura effect. Now, one thing before I go on, there's a very interesting key word in this. It says 6 inches of this unit's Xeric model. So with all these auras, these are only taken from the Silent King himself, not the manures. So you cannot measure the range for these from his rocks and try and move them around and manipulate things. The second ability is Fairy Blades. This is the combat ability. While a friendly Necron unit is within 6 inches of Xeric, models can reroll charge rolls made for the unit. A decent ability, as Xeric's going to need to move across the field for the 24-inch range weapons, and you're going to want to, and the indirect fire as well, but you're going to have to be relatively close. I think that one is going to be very, very situational, and one that you switch over when you're ready to go full-fledged combat mode, where Fairy of the Stars would be something that you kind of sit in more frequently while moving across the field. And last, the Bringer of Unity. While a friendly Necron unit is within 6 inches of Xeric model, you can ignore any and all modifiers to the characteristics of the models in that unit, to any roll or test made for the model in that unit, excluding modifiers of saving throws. So that's kind of something we've seen a couple of times over with the modifier saving throws, and that makes sense. You're not going to change the AP of weapons and cover and stuff like that for this ability. But things that may reduce your toughness, reduce the strength of your weapon, give you minuses to hit, etc., are now able to be null and void. So since you have the ability to give a +1 to hit to a lot of armies for a character being involved, some armies may have -1 to hit as an inherent buff, and this is a good way to get around it. This is another one that is situational, but situationally strong. If you run into a situation where a unit or an army has a lot of negative modifiers to try and keep a unit alive, this is definitely one that you could pop to get around that, and is a very, very strong backup card. In my opinion, Fairy of the Stars is probably the one that will get used the most. I'm not saying it's the dead set winner and the best. I'm saying it's probably the most static of the 3 abilities, while the other 2, the situation needs to arise and present itself. The Bringer of Unity is very, very good, especially into some other matchups with a high shooting army. And with a combat build, being able to reroll charges is still very good. So those are all some great abilities and really put together a really strong data sheet. But let's talk about some of the silly extras, because a lot of that is very good, but there's a lot of extra that you can do with him. He has the ability to really destroy and remove a lot of different units, from the Annihilator beams to the indirect fire. So he has a very wide spread of damage that he can do. But there is also some other little silly tricks that we can do with him. And many of the units have seen, especially in the 10th edition, we're still picking up on what we can and can't do. And there is some interesting interactions that he has with the stratagems in the Necron book. So let's start off with the Undying Legion. So the Undying Legion, and this is an interesting combo that was talking about with a buddy of mine and how this functions. So the first thing we need to remember is that when you activate, since you are the active player and you activate the ability, you get to choose when these abilities resolve. So this one is something that would cost you 2 command points. You'd have to spend it on two 1 command point stratagems in order to make this effective. So the first one is Protocol of the Undying Legion. So Undying Legion is whenever a model is destroyed, you can then immediately activate its reanimation protocol. The trigger that I'm looking at is manures. So your opponent attacks you, shoots you, and does enough damage to take down one of the rocks. Okay, you spend the command point and activate it to resurrect it. At the same time, you also spend a command point to do Protocol of the Vengeful Stars. So Protocol of Vengeful Stars also triggers when one or more models in your unit are destroyed. So first you resolve the Protocol of the Undying Legion for your D3 reanimation. If you got a reanimator nearby, it's even better. And you bring the rock back. Then activate Protocol of Vengeful Stars. Now this unit can shoot as if it were the shooting phase, but must target the unit that just attacked it. This is pretty brutal. This means that you can hit the unit that just hit you, that had enough damage to take out one of your manures, and attack them back. Now, once again, comes into one of the questions of, is he actually leading the unit? Because there is the second cadence, or what happens if a character is leading a unit. He doesn't have the leader trait. So my initial thought is that because he doesn't have the leader trait, he's not allowed to give the command protocol effect for leading a unit. However, if you have someone with the sovereign, the enhancement, nearby him, that means that all of this would trigger as well. Now, the sovereign is a very, very strong enhancement that I've looked at a lot of times for a lot of different units and a lot of different plays. And I feel like this could be a time that having the sovereign nearby him would be effective, because then you'd have ignore cover as well as D3+1 for the reanimation, which might be necessary if one of the other rocks took a little bit of damage. Initially, though, you can reanimate the rocks, which is huge, and then trigger to fire back at the unit that just hit you. No negatives to this, no minuses to hit. You don't lose your next shooting phase. You just shoot back at something. So this is really going to be something to keep in your back pocket, so that when your opponent says, all right, I'm going to start doing damage to him, you turn around and go, okay, well, I'm going to hurt you too. It's going to make your opponent determine if they want to try and use some small arms fire and smaller damage when finishing off a manure. And that's a situation that occurs quite a bit. You don't want to waste a big 6 or D6 or high damage shot going into a manure that may only have 1 wound left, especially if you don't have any way for that damage to carry over, such as devastating wounds. So when you hit that manure, you want it dead. So you may look at a smaller squad and go, okay, I'm going to spray into it to try to get that 1 wound off of it, so that my big weapon can then hit the other rock or go directly into the Silent King himself. And then your opponent triggers everything else. Now, with my belief and everything like that, should notify your opponent about how these things go down and how these interact, and try and not catch your opponent in a what is called a gotcha moment. But needless to say, your opponent may not be able to get around that, and that may be what they have to do. Otherwise, they're just going to burn away a high damage shot. So they have to hope, well, maybe they can do some other carryover damage, and you roll a 1. Because again, if this one's dead and this one takes 1 damage, and you roll a 1 for your Undying Legion to bring it back, and you don't have the Sovereign around, now this one heals for 1, but this rock doesn't come back. And that might be a situation that they're hoping for. Needless to say, you still have the 12 shots that are coming in at AP1 and can really spray that into some infantry, plus the Strength 8 shots as well. But the Annihilation Beams are one of the scarier weapons that the Silent King has from long range, with that flat 6 damage, especially towards vehicles. So all in all, where do we see the Silent King? How does he fall as compared to his 10th edition his 9th edition counterpart? Well, the 9th edition counterpart was significantly broken for a little while. And I will say, because I ran him as well, he was, as I've said before, a battery. You could plug him into nearly any dynasty, and he would just give it so much extra power that you wouldn't see before. This edition, he is not, I will say 100%, he is not an auto include, but he's not dead. He's not dead on the table. He can do some work, with, especially with some of these abilities, depending on your style of Necron Force. He is able to give rerolls where rerolls are hard to come by and almost non-existent in the Necrons. He can still give those rerolls. He's very, very durable. He's not someone that your opponent can just go, okay, I'm going to shoot my big guns at it, because there's a lot of interactions that he has from those shots with our stratagems that makes him extra effective in those situations. I do like the Silent King. I think that they did a good job of making him playable without making him too overpowered and broken. He's not 100% the lead of the dynasties of the Necrons, where you have to have the Silent King, you have to take him. But this is an expensive model. This is an expensive model that takes a lot of time to build, a lot of time to paint. And when it's done, you want to be able to field it on the table and know that it's not going to get destroyed in one turn because your opponent rolls hot or plays Eldar and uses Fate dice. Sorry, I gotta have that little stab in there. But no, but seriously, it's not a model that you want to just crack away and destroy. So if you're thinking about picking up the Silent King, or you have the Silent King and maybe he's sitting on a shelf and he hasn't received a paint job because you're thinking this may be another big model that's just going to be a target for my opponent and just die, it's not the case with the Silent King. You can build an army around him. He functions nicely, and he is actually very, very difficult to still take down in conventional fire. You can hide him. He doesn't have towering, so he's not going to see over things, and infantry are not going to see him when he's hiding behind a rib. So all in all, Silent King, he's not overpowered. He's not broken. He is a solid, solid choice for the Necron army. I look forward to running him soon and seeing what he can actually do and how he actually plays out, especially with that indirect fire. That indirect fire is very, very interesting. I like it a lot. And yeah, if you got him, get him painted, get him ready, and enjoy running him on the table. Hope some of the information helped you in this video to decide how you want to run him, and if you want to run him or if you even want to pick him up. I definitely recommend him. It's a fun model to build. It's a difficult model to build, but a lot of fun. And yeah, guys, please like, share, subscribe, and turn on the bell for notifications. And I'll talk to you in the next video. Thanks for watching.